I'm joined now by Congressman Daniel Goldman. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me again, Brian.
So you had recently had an instance where you confronted a bunch of plainclothes ICE agents who were at your district office in New York. Here's a quick clip of that exchange. So what was said between you and these ICE agents, and what's your reaction more broadly to these people showing up? We've had numerous instances on the news of, for example, ICE agents showing up in court where, these immigrants will show up for their regularly scheduled hearings. The hearings will be dismissed only for those ICE agents to then go ahead and arrest the immigrants anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I was really focused at the time on asking these plainclothes ICE agents why they were wearing masks when they were making arrests, which is something that we've seen over and over again. And nothing that I've ever seen when I was a federal prosecutor working with ICE agents and other law enforcement agents ever before. And so I got some interesting responses. One guy looked at me and said, "Oh, because it's cold." We were, of course, in a temperature controlled building. It was not cold. I said to him,
At
"Well,
the
will
end
you
of May.
testify to that under oath?" And he walked away from me. Another guy said to hide my face, so in case there are videos, which, begs the question, what are you concerned about if you are doing a legitimate law enforcement operation, which, arrests are done all the time by law enforcement agents, and they're not done with masks. So why are these plainclothes officers doing it? And it's just consistent with the policy of fear and terror that this administration is trying to use against immigrants. Now, these are immigrants who are doing everything right, Brian. They are coming through, they go to court, and they are nonviolent. They are not criminals. They wouldn't have a lengthy court proceeding, and their asylum applications would not be heard if that were the case. Many of them have filed asylum claims, which is a lawful pathway to come into this country. And the way that Kristi Noem, the secretary, and Donald Trump and Stephen Miller are trying to get around this asylum process, which is too long, I certainly agree with that, is that they are maneuvering to dismiss deportation proceedings, which then gets rid of the underlying asylum claim. And then they walk out and the ICE agents arrest them and initiate new deportation proceedings under this expedited removal process, which gives immigrants far fewer rights and due process than they would otherwise have in that court hearing. And so we hear so much about Stephen Miller talking about we're getting all these murderers and child rapists and deporting them, and we're going to focus on convicted criminals who shouldn't be here, who are terrorizing our cities. Well, these people are the exact opposite. They're the ones who are doing it right. And of course, it creates perverse incentives because the ones who are doing things the right way should not be the ones who ultimately get snookered and deported. That, of course, incentivizes people not to do it the right way, to go further underground, not to get work visas, not to pay taxes, and generally makes all of us less safe.
There's this whole genre of Trump supporters who are, for example, who own construction companies that are watching these ICE raids take place where they just basically round up everybody who works there. And these are not violent, hardened criminals, the ones who Trump during the campaign promised to deport. These are regular, hardworking folks who are coming here and making sure that our economy actually functions. And so can I have your reaction to these folks who thought they were voting for one thing and are getting something completely different now that Trump's actually in office?
Well, I mean, that's true in immigration. It's true across the board. Trump lies, lies, lies. We've seen that. We've known that for a long time. And essentially everything that he promised was all BS. He's doing, in many respects, the exact opposite, including in terms of his immigration policy. This is driven by a new directive there's been reporting on this that Stephen Miller and Donald Trump, and they're reshuffling the heads of some of the immigration agencies to make 3,000 arrests per day, which more than triples the generally the highest numbers that you see. And so this is now a numbers game for them. They're not focused on the bad ones. They're just focused on getting as many as they can. Even people who are doing things the right way, who may very well have legitimate asylum claims and fear persecution if they go home. And they may stay, they may not legally, but these people often have work visas, they have families, they have lives, and they're literally being grabbed as they walk out of a courtroom and detained, and in some cases potentially removed from the country in less than a week.
Right. Well, one other promise that Donald Trump made during the campaign was this idea that he was going to lower costs for everybody. And of course, he's engaged in this practice where, obviously costs are going up as the result of his misguided trade war. But we're also seeing deep cuts to programs that Americans rely on that are inevitably going to make life more expensive for those folks, including Medicaid cuts and food assistance cuts. Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa was asked today about those deep cuts to Medicaid and SNAP, and the impact that's going to have. Specifically, the fact that when this happens, there are folks in this country who are going to die as the result of that. Here's her response.
So people are not. Well, we all are going to die.
So Joni Ernst saying, we're all going to die. Can I get your reaction to that? Is that what they teach? Is that what they teach you guys at politics school? Just when somebody has concerns about deep cuts to Medicaid and food assistance, that your response should be to shrug it off and just say that everybody's going to die anyway.
That should be the Republican mantra. That's effectively what they believe. They don't think that our safety net programs are worthwhile. They think tax cuts for billionaires are far more important than making sure children can eat. That's where their priorities lie. That's what this reconciliation bill did. And in combination, as you point out, with the tariff tax, which is just going to increase prices, it's going to increase inflation, and so many more millions of Americans not getting health care, not getting food assistance, it is going to result in people dying because of Republican policies. And you see how much they care from Joni Ernst, which is not at all. Right. Because we're all going to die. So who cares if you die sooner rather than later?